Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It is your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Please reach out to me directly. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com for pricing. I have to admit that not every Rolex review is equally enjoyable for me. I'm usually not super engaged by the brand. I respect it, but I don't love it. Days like this, though, it's good times because I adore the model in my hand. This is the Rolex Oyster Perpetual Day-Date 40, a model that came out in 2015. It is the Platinum model 228206 with ice blue dial and diamond Baguette indices. All right, now you can see this one's actually post-2018 because it also includes little crown between Swiss and made. 40 millimeters in platinum. It is massive. 12.1 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip. It is 47.5 millimeters. This is why it's so much smaller than the nominally 1 millimeter larger Day-Date 2. The Day-Date 40 has these pivoted end links, whereas the Day-Date 2 had solid end links. So that one would flare out to over 53 millimeters across the wrist. This one across the wrist, even with a little bit of an outcropping of the end links, the total is 47.6 millimeters across the wrist. And here we have a 21 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Now we'll zoom out a little bit. We'll throw this watch on my wrist. It wears nowhere near as large as the old Day-Date 2. Despite the similar sizing, the pivoted end link of this model makes all the difference. And you can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, this would easily work on a smaller wrist. 14 centimeters, maybe even 13 and a half. Easy to bear. Thin enough to slide underneath the cuff. After all, the Day-Date has always been more dress watch than sports watch since the first one was introduced in 1956. Customarily worn with a suit, and this one will slide underneath any kind of a dress cuff. All in platinum. The feeling is unbelievable. If you've never experienced a platinum watch, especially on full bracelet, you don't know what you're missing until you've tried it. It makes white gold feel like titanium. Now, taking a quick look, this bracelet has always been formally known as the President. Since the first one in 1956, the watch has often been nicknamed the President because of its illustrious and occasionally infamous history of prominent owners. So it's been called the President or the Presidential, but it's properly the Day-Date, and it's always been. The bracelet has properly always been the Rolex President. Now it has a conforming end link to mate it to the case, a little bit of a taper down from the lug. The center links are polished, the outer faces are polished, the shoulder links are satinated, and removable links on each side are removed with screws. Now, a feature that debuted on the first big Day-Date, the Day-Date 2 in platinum, was ceramic-coated pins inside the bracelet. Every Day-Date 40 has these ceramic-coated pins, which means that the links themselves can't wear down the pins. And Rolex bracelet stretch has always been caused by the pins thinning out, not the bracelet physically stretching. So if the pins cannot wear down, the bracelet will not stretch. So this ceramic-coated pin solution kills that problem dead. Now, the nice thing about the President bracelet is that it has the short link cross sections of the Jubilee dress bracelet, so it's really quite supple on the wrist, and I would even venture to say that it vents better than the 3-link Oyster Sports bracelet, so it really is the best of both worlds. Here we have the crown clasp. You can see a media blasted and polished clasp internal, thick gauge platinum used for the single fold. The crown clasp, famous because the only visible partition point between the two halves is the 5-point coronet. Pull it up, you can see it's actually a bit more sophisticated than it's been in past decades. We have a beak and a hook system with a little articulated latch, so you actually have to unlatch this before it's going to open. It's not simply friction fit. It's not a snapshot pop open type of deal, so it's a little bit more secure. Speaking of security, we have a screw down twin lock crown in platinum. You know you're looking at a twin lock in platinum because it'll have one dot. Rolex crowns always have a signature that tells you the metal and whether it's twin lock or trip lock. Screw down crown, screwed in solid platinum case back. And we have a 100-meter water resistance. The case is elegant. The lugs are beautifully tapered. Everything's polished. Rolex has its own foundry. It makes its own alloys, but it also makes its own cases, clasps, and bracelets. So all of this is in-house. The dial, what Rolex calls ice blue, it's been getting more saturated over the years with a more distinct color. The earliest versions of the platinum exclusive ice blue dial were almost silver. Now it is really quite distinctly blue. And it works well as a complement to the ice white of the case, and quite literally the ice set on the dial. Now the gems here are baguette cut. They sit on very subtle white gold indices below. The hands at center, with the exception of the hour hand, or white gold. The hour hand is blued steel. We have a white gold coronet. Now the reason you have all this white gold inside of the watch is because a little bit of moisture inside a case can tarnish hands, indices, and logos on dials. So with white gold, you don't have the danger of that tarnish because it is inert. Now the watch does include a Cyclops eye magnifier. On smaller watches, it can be a little bit of a crowding factor on the dial, but on the bigger dials, it doesn't dominate as much, and as you can see from an arm's length, it does make visibility a little bit easier. I go back and forth on whether I like this feature, but I know this indisputably. I like it better on bigger Rolex models. Now, the watch features two subsidiary setting modes, one of which is hacking seconds, so you can stop the escapement and set the watch to the second against a reference time. There's also a double quick set, which means you can rapidly set the date, but then you can also rapidly set the day just like that. That's what a double quick set is. Inside the case, Rolex manufactured caliber 3255, replacing the old 3155 and 3156. So what we've got now is a rotor that sits on a ball bearing system rather than the old jeweled staff, so it's now more secure against shock. Bidirectional winding, 70-hour power reserve, a LIGA-formed Rolex Chronergy escapement. It's sort of Rolex's answer to the Omega coaxial. It's still a Swiss lever, but very unconventional. This is Rolex's own system, and it leads the watch to earn a COSC chronometer certification as a bare movement. Rolex then cases it up, tests it in 6 positions, verifies it'll run no worse than -2 + 2 seconds per 24 hours. That is the now substantive basis for this term superlative chronometer on the dial. 4 Hz beat rate, 31 pivot joules, full balance bridge with a free sprung balance for shock resistance and precise adjustment. It uses an overcoil hairspring so that in any position the mass of the hairspring is fairly centered, and the watch will keep very consistent time in any position. That handmade Breguet overcoil is also made of a blue oxidized niobium zirconium that is highly anti-magnetic. So this watch, highly anti-magnetic, shock resistant, and water resistant. And again, you've got a useful near 3-day power reserve with 70 hours of reserve. Rolex making every part of this watch, not only on the outside but the inside. Dials, hands, indices. Rolex sets its own gems. It even makes the shock protection, Paraflex, and the very lubricants used inside of this movement. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.